to the rest of the panel, because I think you mentioned something very interesting, Brenna, about the perception that going sustainable, or whatever that stands in current days in aviation industry, means a trade-off to the passenger experience. But there's also the financial element of things, right? So, often we get into a situation where we have to develop, design and deliver a program on time and on budget, and sometimes a sustainable option is not necessarily the most cost-effective or the most readily available to suit your program. So coming to that scene, obviously Boeing has many different sustainability work streams, but this kind of zooming into specific project, you mentioned about the cost. So is that a challenge at the moment in terms of research phase to create the proper business case so it becomes not an or, but becomes an and, using your own terminology, which is quite clever?
This is on. Sorry, I thought there was a button. There are inherent challenges with any type of project like this. When you have a really great idea that could potentially turn into an R&D project, which is essentially what the Sustainable Sidewall project was all about, you're always going to run the risk of not owning that core competency today. And that it can be a hurdle in and of itself, because now you have a lot of proving to do. You have to prove that you can do the thing or build the thing. You can do it well. You can do it cost effectively. And whatever it is that you're making, if it's a product, if it's a process, that it's adding value. Once you do all of that, the justification for capital expenditure is a heck of a lot easier. But you really do kind of need that capital equipment and that tooling to prove it. And so it's kind of this chicken and egg situation, which is also a challenge to work through. Now, we find workarounds, obviously. We have developed incredible industry partnerships and collaborations to bring this work to fruition, and they've been incredibly beneficial. But not having that equipment in-house to kind of help us along our own timeline definitely slowed down the development in this particular project.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. So now moving on to Anais. Now we're going back to, more global vision of Airbus in terms of sustainability. So I'm always following very closely the cabin visions from Airbus. So the previous one was 2030, if I remember correctly. That was very heavy on digitalization to create a more tailored customer journey. So this one, what struck me was, in a good way, obviously, that it still maintains this kind of customization element to it and heavy in digital, but it's the focus on sustainability is actually 100% a different direction than the previous vision was, which is not necessarily mentioned that much, or maybe it was made more evident on this one. So is this kind of customer driven by airlines' feedback that they need that, or is that a passenger driven information, or is basically Airbus' own vision and just leading the vision in that direction and then the rest follows? How is that coming across with 2035 vision?
So basically, for us, there is no antagonism between both visions. As I was trying to explain, and maybe didn't do it very well, for us, digitalization is very important, and it's going to be also an enabler with all of the things that we were mentioning. We will need to have lots of data analytics that will help us. For example, an example was waste reduction from catering and so on. If you don't have these data analytics and even you power that with artificial intelligence, it's not going to happen. So for us, getting to a more sustainable cabin has several aspects, as we have seen, but also digitalization is very important. So our vision was co-created with airlines and companies, and basically it really includes all of the trends, the passenger needs, and as we said, the sustainability is basically the continuation of that.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to touch later, maybe when we open the Q&A debate, about the self-catering or picking up the catering before boarding the aircraft. I think that there's a lot of miles on that concept, and that would be good to discuss later on. So thank you very much for that, Anais. So now we're moving on to design agencies, and we're just talking about customer journey. So Gary, obviously, you have done cars and you have done airplanes. It's kind of, we always talk in the industry about the synergies between both industries. And something that really strikes me when it comes to sustainability, the car industry seems to be generations ahead of aviation. Nowadays, we just talk about that trade-off in the customer perception of customer journey if it goes sustainable anyhow. But brands like Audi or Range Rover, they have managed to create a new idea, a vision of sustainable luxury. So you're paying a premium brand car like Range Rover with a recycled built interior with materials that are coming from plastic bottles, with something you wouldn't accept, let's say, 10 years ago in a 10,000 euro price point car. But you still, people go and buys it. Fashion industry is another example of that. But I just seem to wonder why aviation industry is still trying to get the grips on creating a sustainable or responsible luxury case for the passengers. So from the design standpoint, have you seen some traction going forward in the projects you're working on, of more conscious decisions towards sustainability from the brief stage before the execution?
Hi. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess that you mentioned the car industry is kind of ahead in that area. And in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. But one of the big drivers for the car industry is that we've had a really big change in technology. And sorry, can you still hear me? Yeah. So we had a big change in technology, and that's really driving a lot of things. So moving from internal combustion engines to electric is really making us to look at a lot of different things, and that's pushed sustainability right to the front. And if you look at the statements of the car companies, what they're doing, and even new car companies are being born out of sustainability. So 15 years ago we didn't have Tesla, we didn't have Polestar. We've got these companies now that are embedded. Sustainability is embedded in their philosophy. Whereas with the aircraft industry, we're starting to see that a bit, but we've got a lot of legacy kind of businesses that are trying to learn about sustainability. So I think from the car perspective, that drive has really made quite a big difference. And what we see there is that we're seeing focus on all the interior panels, the substrates. So we've been looking at natural materials for quite a long time, flax and bioresins and these sorts of things. And we've been looking at a lot of recycling for quite a time. So there's just a ton of activity that's going on. But like this industry, the car industry has to lightweight, and we're doing a lot of things to lightweight, and that's changing the way that we make cars. So we will see cars in the future that are made in completely different ways to what they're made today. We are using carbon, but we're also using interesting or old materials, really, aluminium, but we're changing those in different ways. We're using processes that hot press aluminium, so they're really stiff and really strong, but really, really light. But you can also use recycled aluminium, so you can recycle 6000 series and then put it back into the car. We can do that in aircraft as well. So we've done a project recently where we've taken a seat back and we've recycled 6082 and we pressed it, and you can see that at the show. But that's it could be one solution of how we go forwards. The trick is with designers, when you're trying to make those decisions at the early stage, it's not just can you recycle it, is it going to be recycled is another one, because there's a whole new industry of recyclers that's going to come in. But you also got to try and consider what happens over that life cycle. So, if your product weighs 100 grams more over 7 years, is it worth that 100 grams in recycling when you make that decision? And that's the problem, complexity, discussion point. We're all learning about this, about sustainability, is how do you make that choice at a design stage? Where's the data? What can you trust? The trust is a big thing, because if you're not sure about the data, there's lots of vendors out there. Everybody's going to say their product's sustainable, but can you trust the data? Is the data real? At the moment, we don't have enough. Is the bottom line. And me and Chris were talking about this earlier on. You can wait until you got enough data and you can make some really good informed decisions, or you can kind of take sometimes your best guess at where we are right now and move on. And if you're designing new products now, you have to take some of those decisions. And the best way to do that, I think, is to look at what's around. Take the best guess at that, and then you run with that. But there's lots of initiatives. If you look at some of the waste we get into cabins, PU foam's one really, really horrible example. We throw away tons of cushions a year. And why do we throw away tons of cushions a year? Partially because the industry wants us to throw away tons of cushions a year, because if you're a seat manufacturer, you make money on spares. you sell a seat, but you got to sell it at a really tight price. It's really competitive. So there's actually our business case in the industry is driving non-sustainable solutions. So a brief might be, I want to make a seat cheap, but I want to be able to sell another cushion in 2 years' time. So I want that cushion to break down to make some revenue out of that. That PU foam, it's really difficult to recycle. So I think we have to kind of step back a bit and actually go, what does a business case do? Are there other business cases out there? And we're seeing that in the car industry. We're seeing car industry people. There's a company called River Simple, and what they're doing is they're working with a supply base, and they're saying, okay, we don't want to buy off you. We're going to take this car, this product. The person never owns the car, but even the supply base have an ownership in the product all the way through. So they're trying to take that business case and turn it on its head. And maybe that's something that we need to think a little bit about in this industry, because when we're all selling stuff for the price and the buyers are buying at the price, that you're not going to be looking at 7 years. You're going to be looking at what can you get in that purchase decision, and how can we change that to change the design brief. And when we can do that, then we will get more sustainability in.
Well, that's brilliant. I take 2 key points. I'm just going to connect them. So one of them, you said, so some car industries are easy to start from scratch rather than having this kind of legacy way of working. And also, the business case about how you sustain the commercial life and the operational life of a product, seating product. So we're lucky to have, obviously, 2 seat manufacturers here. So I'm going to jump over straight to you, Chris, because I think that one of your brand ethos. First of all, congratulations! Starting a new seating company is a very challenging enterprise. So, it's very good that we have another player in the industry. Well, Explicit's been around for a decade already. So, yeah. So, starting a company from scratch, and then you have some very interesting brand ethos around reliability and also responsibly sourced, and that really struck a chord on me, because I think we're not talking about just circularity or sustainability. It's a responsibly sourced. And then part of that reliability as your unique business model in your seat. So how that it's from your experience, starting from scratch, has been easier to bring all those ethos from day one, because you're very experienced in the industry with seats for decades. So.
Well, it's easy in some ways in that you don't have to challenge your company's culture because you're creating it from day one. And I'm sure at Boeing and at Airbus, you have issues changing your culture. I know in a much smaller company I used to work in with only 250 people, we had our culture, and it would be hard to change it. So it's very easy. We suffer from the lack of truth. We don't know. Everyone knows the price of something. You know how much it costs, and you can very easily compare it because you can ask 5 suppliers and they'll give you a very accurate number in a currency, a common currency that we all understand. And we don't have that for carbon. I'm not even sure carbon's the right measure. It's environmentalness, which is a slightly bigger question, isn't it? And I think that's where I'm focusing my attention personally within Unum as we get going, is to start building business systems. We've had sort of 5,000 years since the Sumerians of accounting systems that give us the cost of stuff, and it's been refined into management accounts, and we're very good at those things now. And we need something similar for sustainability, such that when your procurement person, and this comes to sourcing, right? When your procurement person's buying the component that's been designed by Gary, for better or for worse, he's designed it, and there it is. I've now got to go and buy it somewhere, and from someone. And I'm going to get a bonus if I'm a purchasing manager if I buy it cheaper than last year, almost certainly. Well, good, but not if it doubled the carbon, right? That's not future good. If you take aluminium as a great example, aluminium is a fantastic material, and I think we're going to see more of it in aircraft and in interiors because it's endlessly recyclable. I mean, there's great stuff what you're doing with carbon fibre, but it's being reused once and then it's sunk. It's not. We can't take it again off the sidewall and turn it into a wingtip. That bit we can't do. With aluminium, you can. Fantastic stuff. But the best. You probably remember from school, if those of you who are engineers in the room, that aluminium is smelted from bauxite using a huge amount of power, which is why Norway does a lot of aluminium smelting, because they use hydroelectric cheap power. It's also very carbon low. Is that a thing? Carbon low power, low carbon power. Conversely, if you buy it from a country that has an overwhelmingly coal-fired energy infrastructure, the embedded carbon in your kilo of carbon, kilo of aluminium before you turn it into something might be 4 times higher. And if you're a long way away from that country and you ask a supplier to make you that part over there and ship it over here because they've got very low labour costs, and you can kind of work out the geographics here. I live in Europe, a faraway country to the east that uses a lot of coal to make stuff, has a reputation for making cheap parts. And they probably are going to get my bonus on a dollar basis. But if I add in carbon costs of the fact that the billet of aluminium's got 13 kilos of carbon in it compared to 4 from the Norwegian supplier, and then I've transformed it in a workshop that's run off a coal-powered power grid, and then I've shipped it 5,000 miles. What's that number? And that's what I'm trying to work out how to do, trying to build a different management account that says you've got a thing called, for those who studied it, purchase price variance is the management sets a target price. You beat or exceed that price as a buyer, and you get a negative or positive PPV. And that's what I used to get in my management accounts. The net PPV this month was bad. Right, who's for a rocket? And what I want next to it is SIV, Sustainability Index Variance, where you're targeting your employees on both, and a blend of the two. So that's what I'm trying to do. And the difficulty is not having a truth and not having a supply chain that even understands the language, because they don't know either. So we're all finding a way forward. So it sounds like a counsel of despair, but I don't think it is, because actually Gary said it for me, which is do the simple stuff. Don't bond things together if you can screw them together, because when it comes to recycling, they need to be separated. Don't focus on weight. Weight is something 7 times the car. I forget this number, but it's something to do with a multiple of 7. If you save a kilo in weight, it's better than 7 times the carbon in choosing a different material. Anyway, that's rubbish. Something like that. Weight is still king, because weight is scope 3 emissions. I've already really interesting for you, or both of you really, with sustainable aviation fuel in 5 or 7 years' time being 46% of the mix, is it going to change my number? How much carbon's in sustainable aviation fuel? But see what I mean? If imagine there was no airplanes didn't generate any carbon through the act of flying, then we'd be solely interested in the amount of carbon embedded in the product and its end of life concerns, and you wouldn't care how much it weighed. I mean, you remember the promise of nuclear fusion, cost-free fuel. I mean, it never happened, right? But it might change that 7 number, if it's true, might become 5. I don't know, it'd be interesting to work out. But that's part of the lack of truth we have. But when we get that number, we can feed it into these business systems that we've built, and it'll give us better decision-making.
So it sounds like that's very insightful delivery, but it sounds like data is one of the problems. Having reliable data, just connected to what you said, Anna, is 1% of the passengers are offsetting their carbon because they just don't have transparency in the process. And it's very interesting because you're talking about lightweight is one of the obviously holy grails of the aviation industry, of lighter weight, less fuel burn, and so forth. But there are so many aspects of the supply chain that you just basically talked about, which are quite relevant. And I struggle to see any airlines nowadays making that the customer proposition of saying, well, we're supplying our seats from a supplier that has taken into account all these factors, rather than just going and buying or doing some BFE program, and then you just try to offset the carbon at the end of the journey. So it's, I think we're still in the infancy of just making a consistent business case that will actually sell seats, because people will make a conscious decisions based on reliable information that we're still trying to work out. And speaking about lightweight, I think that, explicit is, you guys have been ahead of the curve when you launched your first iteration back in 2013, if I remember correctly, wasn't it? Which is, fair to say, it was a very, very harsh approach on weight saving. It was quite a military approach in terms of the design. And it was fascinating that you guys did a U-turn in your business direction, and you're now working with Stellantis Design Group, which are like massive. I think last time in the last conference we shared together, you used that sentence, which was really good, which is obviously less is more, but you just rephrase it, and less weight is more for the passenger, which is like quite quite clever thing. And it's a nice mantra, I think, that in the industry we could take going forward. So coming back to you, in terms of, lightweight design requires very specific type of materials. So this kind of circularity approach and maybe using recycled materials as a baseline, how many challenges you have to go through versus sourcing, like you were saying, a kilogram of aluminium brand new rather than going through the whole availability of materials just to support your lightweight targets and your designs?
I think there are two questions. I'll focus on the first one first. Less is more. I think it looks quite controversial. At the beginning, we were thinking that we could make better comfort at lower weights, and I think we went in the wrong direction. And so over the last 5 years, we changed the route, actually. I think a seat has many functions. The two most important probably are safety and passenger experience. And actually on a seat, to simplify, it's quite split. The structure is here to guarantee the safety, and everything else, cushion, cover, accessories are here for the passenger experience. At Explicit, at the beginning, we saved much weight on the two functions, so structure and accessories. Over the last years, we have changed the direction. So on the seat frame, it is true we have saved much weight, roughly 50% versus any other seat frame. Traditional seat frames are made of aluminium. We are using carbon fiber and titanium to make the light seat frame. But over the last years, we have decided that part of that weight saving on the seat frame, we will invest it in the seat comfort, so on the second function. And so today we have a super lightweight structure that passes all same crash test certification than any other seats, but we are able to put more and more weight on the comfort, on the cushions, and on the accessories. And so at the end we have a seat that is still lightest even on the market, but with much more weight dedicated to the passenger experience. And so that's why I think less weight on the seat frames brings more to the passenger. On your second topic about material, today we, as per market, is mostly using aluminium and plastic, and of course they have many benefits. They are low cost from a price standpoint. They are also low cost from a mechanical standpoint, and as per our analysis, they are also quite low cost from an environmental standpoint. For the reason being that their residual value, the residual value of the aluminium is so low that most of the time it doesn't pay for the dismantling cost. So of course, from a technical standpoint, you can recycle it. I fully agree, and you can do it many times. But in fact, what you will get from that aluminium, the price is so low that you will not pay for dismantling. At Explicit, we decided to use two core materials, titanium and carbon fiber. Titanium because the residual value is much higher, and so it can pay for the dismantling, and that's what we do today. And for carbon fiber, of course, we summarize carbon fiber. Actually, it's composite. There are many categories of composite. The one we are using is thermoplastic. Thermoplastic has different advantages and drawbacks, but as main advantage, it is easily recyclable. And so all our treatable, for example, today are made of our own industrial waste. So it's like what Brenna was explaining about Boeing, of course at our humble level, at a seat level, but 100% of our composite waste are reused in our treatable, and it's flying now for the last 4 years with a very good robustness. I think you finished also with the cost of recyclability. What we found out actually is that when we started the company, we were only using brand new material, brand new carbon fiber, brand new composite. The seat was expensive. We must be clear about that. Over the last 5 years, we have used more and more recycled composite, either from our own waste or from the industry. And of course, that recycled composite is still more performant actually than an aluminium, but it's much cheaper. And so today we have a treatable that is made of recycled carbon fiber that is lighter, more robust than plastic, honeycomb treatable, and is still less expensive. And that's all the beauty of it, of that circular economy, is that we get the lightweight, we get the reduced carbon footprint, and we get some savings out of it. And that's why today we are going very strong in that direction. And today we are able to sell the seat at a price that is very competitive compared to traditional seats because of all this recycling benefit.
Thank you very much, Amaury, for that. Very insightful. So now it's time for Q&A with the audience. So we have a question over here, so if we can get the mic's on its way. So we got half an hour for questions, so I will encourage you to ask to all of our panelists, especially in the topic which is quite close to our hearts.
Hi, Tom Boone from Simple Flying. I think I'm going to ask the question that Cristian was hinting about. I understand the sustainability aspect from passengers picking up their meal before boarding a flight, but to me that seems like it's detrimental to the passenger experience. If you look at European flights, the people who are getting meals are business travelers, business class travelers. You don't get a meal so much in economy. To me, the business class traveler is the person that just wants to get through the airport to the aircraft. They don't want more extra steps on the way. So how do you find the right balance between sustainability and passenger experience?
Well, in this case, the example was in order, as you well understood, to reduce waste, because catering is one of the areas where big improvements would be needed, for sure. And that was an example indeed with the box that could be reused. It was an example of shorter haul flights, for sure. And the idea would be to really have fresh food. So it's not something, that would be not high level or high quality at all. That was not at all the purpose. The idea would be to have a system to reuse the boxes and so on. But it's, again, it could be a business person, or it could be another type of traveler, because there the thing is that as you can pre-order and you can choose, it's always in the end, the idea of having this personalized service and the touch points, as we were mentioning before, during the journey, it's really aimed at people who want a specific high quality thing and are also conscious about sustainability, and therefore, are into this whole journey, basically. But the idea was not at all to compromise in terms of quality, and maybe I did not insist on that point, but the whole idea as well on our journey is not to compromise, and I think you said it as well, Brenna, is not to compromise on passenger comfort. It's more, to give, as the car manufacturers have done, transparency as well on which kind of materials have been used in the cabin. How do you show that? Is there a specific design that passengers are expecting, or like an electric car? You recognize it immediately just by the design of it. Can we do that in the cabin as well, so that passengers know from the first look that it's sustainable? You see what I mean? So, don't know if I'm really answering. But.
Could I just pick up? Yeah, sorry, I thought I'd just pick up on that as well, because it's always difficult to take stuff away. When an industry's there and you've got a product, and then you say, "Oh, I'm going to take something away from that." The first is, well, it's worse. And I mean, we did that maybe 15 plus years ago, where we took seats and stopped them from reclining. And at the beginning, people said, look, you can't do that because it's a niche market. Nobody's going to buy a seat like that, because today I can recline. But we were putting seats closer together in the cabin, and actually got a better product when you fix a seat back and you can curve it and stuff like that. So we kind of recognized from a design perspective years ago that there was an opportunity to do that. And I think that's one of the things that we, as an industry, we need to think about too. It's not just about the material sustainability. It's about, are there other ways of doing things? And if you challenge, let's say, the meal service on a short haul, you could say, well, look, and I don't usually buy a bacon sandwich on a plane. I'm flying for 2-3 hours. I'm not too fussed about it. And if somebody produced a product for me that it didn't have a galley, you just throw the galley away, You've got a seat that doesn't have a tray table. So if you don't have a tray table, which is a big flat thing, you've got more space. So I've got more space. Don't have a galley, so I can't get my bacon sandwich. But instead of the galley, I've got a big lavatory at the back. I've got a lavatory I can get in. I've got a lavatory that people with restricted mobility can get in. And then if you do that, you could manipulate a little bit of the space, and you might be able to, say, take some of that space you've just grabbed and move a few things around to give yourself a place to put a wheelchair. And all of a sudden, you've got a completely different model. You've got an airline that's flying with a product that is really good for people with restricted mobility. You're flying with less weight because you've just thrown some stuff away. You've got a lighter weight seat product because you don't carry the tray table. So is that product viable? And I think it is, but you've got to challenge some sort of preconceived things and put it out there. Because if you jump on a bus for 2 hours, you don't always have a tray table on the back. We've got used to that. We've got used to the grand days of flying, of having an experience. And you've got to have a tray table on the back of your seat, but do we really need that? It's a question.
And the public's changing. So no one's arguing for the status quo. I think increasingly the audience, the public, is going to be trying to pull us forward. I'm wondering why the hell we haven't turned up if we just keep doing what we've been doing.
We got another question over here. It's a very open topic to elaborate late, but just we got another one here if we can pass on the mic. Yes. So then we got another one over there, which is good.
Just for speed.
Yeah, the whole catering thing in the airline industry it needs a complete rethought.
Hi, Finch Lawrence here, Runway Girl Network. Just want to say thank you very much for an incredibly, I would say, inspiring conversation, because I came into this with a slightly cynical view, but I think there are some very incredible things you've talked about here, which is really exciting to hear. Robotic lunch ladies notwithstanding. I think the one I wanted to pick up on, though, was that it talked about the automotive experience, and one of the things they talked about in cars is that every 3 to 5 years somebody buys a new car, and they might have more MPG, they might be more sustainable, but the sheer cost of building that car and buying it far outweighs any of those benefits. So when thinking about aviation aircraft interiors, have you done any studies about, is it more sustainable to rip out an interior and replace something that is lighter, or keep the one that you already have and not have to go through the sunk carbon cost of building the materials, taking them, retrofitting them? Like, where is the sweet spot for when planes need to be retrofitted where you're having more of a carbon benefit?
No, what is interesting in what you say is that what we see, which was not the case a few years ago even, is that when we do retrofit programs with specific airlines, they're actually more than asking, what are we going to do with the current interior? And then this is exactly what you said. It's part of the business case. So we are looking into how, for example, to reuse the seats in another place, or how to recycle in the different elements if they are changed, or how to minimize the number of elements that should be changed as well. Like, for example, just an example, in a single aisle aircraft, if you want bigger bins, for example, just changing the box itself and not everything else around, like not having to change the sidewall panel or the light strips that are very expensive, as you know, and keeping them all, and not having to change the ceiling panel, not having to. So we have seen really a change as well with the expectations of the airlines, and how all of this retrofit business case is calculated and seen. I don't know, Brenna, if you want to.
Yeah, I would say that from a retrofit perspective, there are so many hidden costs that come with it as well. You think about what an airline has to go through to take that airplane out of service, to keep it grounded, to make those changes. And so that's something that they're constantly thinking about. With a retrofit program, they'll usually time it with their heavy checks when they do some type of retrofit activity. Questions are being asked of us as well around the sustainability of our cabin materials. I know that Anais shared the number of 10 to 20% that That is the recyclability by weight of the airplane, and it's predominantly made up by the cabin. We have found similar numbers at Boeing as well. And so it's an industry quest, not just an individual OEM quest to figure out how to make the cabin more sustainable, more recyclable, to shrink those retrofit times as well, which is, I think, what you were just driving to. Being able to not rip the entire interior out. If there's just one small component that you're trying to change, that will reduce that cost and that time on ground too. So those are all things that we're looking at and focused on too.
I think that human nature being what it is, we all like new things, and we do like new things. So in principle, in a spreadsheet, if I can produce a seat that can have a different set of clothes, 15% of the seat replaced in 5 years' time to make it into a new product, that's objectively better, isn't it? Except it probably won't happen because my competitor will come up with something slightly snazzier, and a change is as good as a rest. So I think recyclability is the thing. Yeah, so we can generally use it again. And it's interesting we're talking about aluminium not being economically recyclable at the moment or today. And that's part of this truth we're grasping for, because if the governments get their shit together and put carbon tax in place, that won't be the case. Suddenly the price of aluminium is going to go zooming up through regulation. And neither of us know whether it is or whether it isn't, right? That's part of our truth. But which isn't back to what I hope isn't the council of despair, because I'm 100% behind your view, which is do something and start now, because it's easier than you think, and it starts small. Each choice to buy this from here, to buy it from there, to use this material or that material. Don't bond things together.
I think the other thing just to think about is that you mentioned, like, we lighten the new, but there's a commercial driver too, because you got warranty with new products. So seat frame 10 years, you got plastics 5 years, cushions 2 years, dress covers 1 year. All those things are out there. So once you've got a product that's like 5 years, 7 years old, you start thinking about commercially, you might need to buy something new. So there's that's there. I think the other thing that you mentioned, has anybody done the data and actually looked at it? I'm absolutely sure nobody has. A good guess, nobody has. But of course, we're all going to start doing it now. We're going to be looking at this, and we're going to be awash with data. And in 5 years' time, we'll be making quite different decisions to what we are right now. But one of the other things maybe to mention is that there is an industry out there. There's a recycling industry out there, not just for materials, but for cabin parts. So there are companies that will take an old lavatory or an old bag bin, and they'll take it, they'll refurbish it, recertify it, and put it back into the system. And these tend to be relatively small companies. They make money doing that. It's a commercially viable thing. So we've already got something working, but how do you scale it? That's the next thing, is how can you scale that? And when you talk to a lot of these guys, it's really about volume. If they could start to get volume, with either complete components or with materials and raw aluminium, plastic. Aluminium and plastic are really easy, relatively, things to recycle in our cabin. They're two easy wins right now. But the thing is, like you were saying about the aluminium, a lot of it just gets thrown away. There's a lot of seats and seat frames and everything just gets thrown, because you got 7075, you got 6082, you got 2024, all these different aluminium types. It's all bolted together. It takes time to rip apart. But if you've got absolute tons and tons of it in an area, you could make a business case to do that. So I think it's really trying to join those businesses up and then help us build this recycling industry that's going to take this material and commercially make it viable for the future. And there's going to be new jobs. There's going to be new jobs created, because how do you take this material in the future and change it? And designers, there's going to be specialist designers that are looking at recycled material and how you can upcycle, how you can change it and stuff like that. So I think it's a problem, but it's a really exciting problem for us to solve.
And at Explicit, we consider that it's the seat manufacturer that should be responsible for the dismantling. So right now, we are on the way to contractualize the fact that we will get back all our old seats, dismantle it ourselves so that we can reuse ourselves what we can, like the composite. Of course, some parts right now we are not able to reuse it. We talked about the PE foam and this kind of parts, but we consider it is our responsibility, social responsibility as a manufacturer, to offer a service of dismantling the seats. We have already done it at some seat level. Now we are receiving 700 of our very first seats, so like 8-9 years old, to make it at a second scale, which will be, of course, a challenge. And if it works okay and the economics work fine, we'll move to the next step, which will be to offer that service for all of our customers. And we think we are the best one to be in a position to offer such service. And right now, it's not 100% sure if it will be something where it will cost us some money, or we might earn some money out of it, actually.
So we got more questions, but just a very quick thought. This is interesting when you're talking about recycling the cabin, what to do with those materials. It's part of also corporate responsibility. Just talking about buying back seats, but there are companies already in the supply chain industry. There's a seat manufacturer company based in Mexico. They are getting back their old seat covers, and they're handing out to the local communities of Aborigines so they can make artisans and get a way of living out of it. And that's another element of the recycling of the industry that you were mentioning, Gary, that as soon as it starts to grow and expand, the more we use it, the more it's going to have ramifications that will benefit the whole, not the aviation community, but the community around, which is a great thing. So next question, I'm not sure who was first. There you go. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Caroline and I work for Seymour Powell, and I have a question for you, Chris. I thought it was really interesting what you said earlier about measuring data, and it's amazing the work you guys are doing on gathering that data and placing carbon at the forefront of your sailing offer. But how do you collect that data and how do you analyze it? What are the tools you guys use within your workflow to measure it and be able to be fully transparent? Because I think a lot of people will benefit from around the room of knowing those tools and softwares and partnerships.
Well, when we do it imperfectly is the answer at the moment. The life cycle analysis is the thing, which is trying to work out from beginning to end and what exists, what your environmental impact of your design decisions are. Because at the moment we're not manufacturing, we're in design. We've just finished certification. We're hoping to win a customer. It's going to be great. But right now we're making design decisions. So we took some advice from Gary's simplicity, really, which was, well, first of all, we believe that less is more. And we say there's a Frenchman, de Saint-Exupéry, who said, perfection is achieved not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. So that was, don't design a complicated seat. That was our brief to our designers. Wasn't Gary, sadly, with working with Acumen. I mean, that was our brief, less is more. Seats can't be comfortable. Only people can be comfortable. And therefore, comfort's found in the spaces between the seats. So less seat is more space. It's what you do. It's more comfort. So first of all, don't design a complicated seat. Next rule of thumb was, don't bond things together if you can screw them so that you can take them apart, so that when it's economic to recycle them, they can be recycled, even if it's not economic now. And then secondly, plastics are good examples. Again, it was PVC versus polycarbonate, two different chemistries. One's made from ammonia and salt, one's made from oil. And polycarbonate has 3 or 4 times the embedded carbon in the raw material as PVC. So just choose the PVC one. And all the plastic manufacturers have both. You just have to choose the right one. And so we turned it into some rules of thumb. And we're really wrestling with what a real life cycle analysis looks like. Not least of all because they turn out to be dynamic, because once you design it and then you procure it in different ways. So we're trying to build some business systems around that at the moment, and haven't finished and haven't succeeded really. We're looking for some standardization. There are a few out there. There's a few ISO standards on. But that's a particular thing, because you cannot do your own life cycle analysis, because you have to rely on your supplier saying what they've delivered to you, and she on what's delivered to her, and her on what's delivered to her, and on all the way back. So this is where we need this common currency. So we're going to see that common currency, I think, evolving in the next decade, probably. But meanwhile, start, because you must not let perfect be the enemy of good.
Do you think you'll be able to have a material passport by 2030?
Withdraw what?
A material passport, or a passport of your seat.
We will, yeah. By the time we deliver, we'll know what's in our seat. I think we will, yeah. We will. Because business class seats take a long time to develop. So we've kind of frozen the design. So I won't deliver one for 2 years. I've got 2 years to work out what's in it.
Cool.
So we have very good memory, Chris. In 2025,
I'll be here.
That question about the passport.
Having sold loads of seats as well.
We got another question over there. We got a couple, so thank you. 3 actually. Good stuff. Thank you.
My name is Sergio Gomez from Dries & Catering Equipment. So thank you for mentioning trolleys and food around there. But my question is a bit more practical. So we're all figuring out what sustainability is. And we all agree that there's not really a way to measure sustainability or to explain to our customer, okay, we're more successful, we are being sustainable because of this or that. So as an example, within our organization, we provided some sustainability and circularity courses to our teams. And they all came back with different numbers of how recyclable or sustainable our equipment is. So basically my question to the panel, I would say the 5 of you is, how can we as suppliers of equipment be able to provide you the information you need to claim your goals on sustainability? So what is the customer asking for you, like the airline, and how do you project that down to us as suppliers? Is it because you're sourcing the material from a place that has less impact because they use, solar panels instead of coal? Or is it just the weight, or is it the end of life? And the easy answer will be, everything is important, but to what extent do you say, okay, for now, let's break it down, and this is more important for now. You know what I mean? So look forward for some input here. Thank you.
Good luck with that one.
Well, maybe just a very quick start, I guess. That I think your easy answer is right. To be honest, I think we have to look at all these aspects, because if you leave one of them out, you've got the gotcha situation that something really is not sustainable. So I know it's not something it's easy to hear, really, that actually I'm going to need to do some significant work to show where what it costs to the environment for me to produce this product. But we're all going to have to do that. The airlines are going to have to do it. The aircraft manufacturers have to do it. The suppliers have to do it. And as designers, we need to make some decisions that make our future products a lot more sustainable. So unless we actually have that complete transparency about all these aspects, and I know it seems like a Goliath type of thing to do, but unless we do that, we can't make those decisions. And one of the challenges we've got is that there's lots of stakeholders, and there's lots of reasons potentially why maybe some people don't want to say that information. There could be some trade secrets and so forth. So getting that transparency is a massive challenge for us in the industry. But I think we have no choice. We've as a race, a few hundred years ago, we weren't making too much impact on the planet. We're quite happy to live in a certain way. We've invented all these things that really have become quite unsustainable. And unless we change that, unless we do something about that, there's a limit to how long we'll be around, really. So it's sort of, I know it sounds kind of dramatic, but you have to kind of put sustainability at the heart of what you're doing. So the only way I think we're going to be able to do it is to understand, collect that data. And I mean, with AI right now, we're going to be, chonking through data like nobody's business in a few years' time. So at the moment, it's only 6 months into some of the AI stuff we're using just for visualization purposes, and it's already designing stuff for people. And that's only really with 6 months. So, give it 6 years, it's going to be quite amazing. So, yeah.
To add to that a little bit, I think everybody up here has used some version of the same type of language, either life cycle assessment or life cycle analysis. And I don't know how familiar everybody is with LCAs, but essentially you are measuring everything against all of these different environmental performance measures, or EPMs. And it can be something that has 3 variables. It could have 50 variables. And I think what that really shows is that measuring sustainability, in the words of our keynote speaker, is complex rather than complicated. And so it's not as black and white as just saying, let's focus on weight right now. Because if you focus on weight, you might be screwing up 12 other environmental performance measures to drive down the weight. And then it doesn't wind up being the true sustainable alternative. And so you have to kind of constantly be tracking to all of these variables, weight, traceability, transparency, et cetera, to really drive towards that that sustainable material alternative or whatever it is that you're searching for. So the easy answer, as you said, and to echo Gary, is probably the right one. You really kind of need to be looking at the macro life cycle of what it is, from what you manufacture it to its end of life recyclability as well.
And just if you haven't got perfect data, which you won't have, because in that life cycle analysis, you're going to have to say how many grams of carbon are in a kilowatt hour of electricity. And that depends, doesn't it? Where you are in the world, what the weather's like that day, and so on. So you have to make an assumption, a budget, and you have to build a model and recognize that all models are wrong, but some are useful. And you continue, and then work on improving your assumptions. And then these life cycle analyses are full of assumptions. But we'll just get better at it. But begin. That's the trick. Begin.
We got 2 additional questions, one over there, one over here, and then an additional add-on to that one. And I think that will bring us to the end of the session, but let's carry on, please.
Hi, is it working? Yeah. I'm Cristian from Lufthansa Technik, and I'd like to maybe ask quite a provocative or a little bit provocative question here. So Gary said put sustainability to the heart of what we are doing, and Anais talked about a paradigm change earlier. So I would like to understand your opinion or position to if the industry needs to somehow change the priorities somehow to a less profit-oriented way of working and put, as you said, sustainability more to the heart of what we're doing. I mean, I don't know the margins of your products that you sell, but maybe what do you think about using or having less margin and more sustainability? So that would be very interesting. Thank you.
You're assuming it's more expensive.
Yes.
Evidence.
At some point, at least.
Why?
Well, right now the technologies I believe that we're looking into are not as far on the road as, for example, carbon or
Well, one step towards sustainability is don't use adhesives. Use a rivet. Rivet's pretty cheap.
Okay, that's just one thing, I guess. So I think.
Yeah, but I want to challenge your assumption because I don't think you can produce any evidence that it's more expensive. We haven't done it yet. It's designers, engineers thrive on requirements. I need to know what you want me to design, what it must do, and it's just another requirement. It always has to be light. It has had to have been light for many years, and now it has to have low carbon in its life cycle. And it's just to design is to choose. You just make different choices. I challenge the idea that it's less, that it's worse, or it's more expensive. It's just a different set of choices.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a designer, of course, so you can answer to this one. But what I was trying to say as well is that we need, and that's what you just said, we need a change in the way in which we see things and we do things, and not take these assumptions. I mean, and just, as soon as you start designing, think about what you're going to do with it afterwards. And maybe it's not going to be more expensive because you design it with that in mind, and before you didn't have it in mind. Like, consider it, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it is a mindset change, to be honest. And it looks like a massive task, but if we all do a little bit, it makes a big difference. So I think that's the first place to start, really, and just think, what can I do today that's more sustainable? But there are things. You mentioned the business case. Could you reduce your profit margin to make it more sustainable? But there might be things that we could do with a business case that actually we're driving non-sustainable activity in our business. Whether that's an airline wants to keep a slot so it's going to fly backwards, or an empty plane to keep the slot. That waste and those sorts of things that are in our business we can take out. Now that's actually that will help the bottom line, really. So I think with sustainability, we need to look more than just materials. We need to look at the operational efficiency. We need to look at all these things that could improve. Maybe the business case for a product now shouldn't be how much am I going to pay for that sidewall, or how much am I going to pay for that seat? It might be, what's the impact of that seat over a 7-year cycle on an aircraft? Because maybe if I spend an extra, $500 on an Explorer seat, but it saves me this amount of carbon compared to, other product, that's the sort of thing that you need to be looking at. Whereas, when Explorer seats started, I can imagine it was really difficult to get a foothold because you got seats out there at a certain figure and maybe your product was, twice as expensive or something. So how do you sell that? You kind of have to say to somebody, an airline, look, I'm going to sell you a product that's twice as expensive, but you're going to save it in 7 years' time. That's not that easy a sell to someone's going to buy it and they're going to be moving on in 18 months from that job as a purchaser.
Yeah, just a quick response in there. I'm totally with you. I think we need a more holistic way of looking at things, and this also includes the airlines from my perspective. So they need a more holistic way and maybe less profit oriented. But yeah,
maybe.
And the regulators.
Just a few words about the contract we actually announced last week. We announced a contract with Jazeera Airways, so Croatian low cost. They actually decided to retrofit their full Airbus fleet, so a little bit more than 15 aircraft. By retrofitting it, they will save 1.1 metric tons on the aircraft. They will use half of that weight to add one seat row, so 600 kilo roughly. Then they will use 300 kilo to install USB on all seats. They had not at the beginning. And the remaining 300 kilo will be used for fuel savings, so CO2 savings. And so with that use case, I think you see all the benefits of it. I mean, the economics of the airline will be better, plus 6 passengers. For the passenger, he will get USB he didn't have. There will still be fuel saving and CO2 saving that will, let's say, pay for the new seats. And so at the end, bottom line, it's all positive and everybody has earned its living. So I think we can make it like positive circular economy. That's the point.
And just to add a little bit more to that, because what Gary was saying and now what Amari was just saying is, I think everybody focuses on the upfront raw materials cost. What does it take to make a new material or come down the learning curve for exploring new applications with new types of material? I know with the sustainable sidewall, we get lobbed the question all the time. Is it more cost effective to use the recycled carbon fiber versus manufacturing new? Like, how much better is it? And as Amari was mentioning earlier, it is more cost effective. It's cheaper to use recycled carbon fiber than it is to manufacture new carbon fiber strands and then turn it into a woven composite. But then also extrapolating it out to that more holistic picture that you were just talking about. When you think about the manufacturing technique, pitting the sustainable sidewall, just as an example, against a standard sidewall that we use today, for starters, with the standard sidewall, you're using prepreg. It's fiberglass, but prepreg requires refrigeration or to freeze it. So you need the capital to build a freezer and to store it. In addition, it has a shelf life. It spoils after about a year and it starts to lose its properties even in the freezer. So there's inherent spoilage and waste there. And then because the way that we manufacture sidewalls today, there are multiple layers of that prepreg plus a core. So you have all of that material that you have to use, which means you need a kitting area in the factory to put it together. And then the press time takes a while. With this new sustainable sidewall, it's one non-woven material. So you take out all those extra layers. You don't have the capital requirement for the freezer. You don't have the kitting area. And it takes a third of the time to press it. So all of those things in kind of the value chain there of that sidewall coming to life contribute to that overall picture of lower cost, on top of it just being a better material too.
Right, we got one question over there and then another one before we run out of time, but I think it's interesting, so we can go over a couple of minutes. So, sorry, you got the gentleman over there. Well, anyway, order is different. We'll stick with your question at the end. Please go ahead.
Hi, Shashank Nigam with Simplifying. I was very fascinated by the life cycle discussion earlier. And I wonder who should foot the cost of this life cycle analysis. Is this the airline's job? Is this the manufacturer's job? And if it is the manufacturer's job, then does this become biased? And I'll give you a real life example. Delta decided to do away with single-use plastic and introduce paper cups. The same month, KLM decided to continue with plastic bottles and not go ahead with paper cups. Both of them independently ran their life cycle analysis. I'm guessing one paid more and hence got different results. But who should be doing this? How does this percolate through the industry? And can there be a standard without two airlines, which typically would work very well together, coming to different conclusions on the same question?
I think it's one of those lovely "it depends" questions. It depends what you're studying, and I think regulation, standardization around lots of things with the sustainability across the board, it is needed. I don't think it's any different personally in the life cycle assessment world either. Obviously, you can come up with biased results in terms of what you're looking for. For the life cycle assessments that we do, I think obviously it's the manufacturer's responsibility. You wouldn't want to pass that on to the airline. We're trying to improve our own products. So I think that would definitely fall to the OEMs to fund that type of work. Now, who conducts those assessments? That starts to get out of my depth. I don't know who the right governing bodies would be to run those assessments.
I think it has to be self-assessment because it's a decision-making tool that helps you choose what to do. And you can legitimately have different answers for different airlines because they've got one's in Holland, I'm guessing, with lots of wind power, and one might be in Connecticut with lots of coal. And they got different answers. And they were legitimately, they weren't necessarily bent. They made legitimately different answers because they're a different power mix. And it's the assumptions you make about the carbon you're capturing in each step of the life to keep the lights on, to keep the freezer cold, to move the parts. That's all part of the life cycle analysis. And they have to be done by the organization that's doing the activity. So, and I think we should expect the regulatory environment to be changing around us too. And I hope we'll see a carbon tax, which will radically transform our behaviours. We'll see something like it, and we'll see change in the regulatory environment where airlines have to fly empty slots, empty aircraft to maintain the slot at an airport, which is absolutely sustainably bonkers. But it's the law. So the law is going to change too eventually because it's happening. The weather is changing. Look outside. The weather's changing.
And I have a personal dilemma now on my side is that we are conducting the life cycle assessment. And the question is, should we communicate about the output, the figure? And because there are so many ways to calculate it, as you mentioned, I am really scared that the next day we share a figure, my competitor will say, yeah, I'm 2% better. And I will have no way to challenge that because, of course, who did the calculation as per which statement and everything. So we are saying environmental should be synonymous of transparency, but here I cannot, or I'm really scared to do it actually. And so my opinion is not made yet. Should we share the result publicly? Should we not share? Should we just give imagine it's 100, that's how our roadmap for the next years, but of course it doesn't have the same value. Of course, weight is not everything, but we know it's like almost 97% of the carbon footprint for a seat. So we think we are good at it. We can be better, but we are good at it. And we would like to communicate about that, to show that competitive advantage. But right now, it's too dangerous situation to be in.
Okay, so I think anyone...
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, because I can understand that. I'd be in the same sort of position, worried about sharing data like that. But the problem is going to be that there's all the suppliers are going to feel like that because it's used as a competitive advantage that I'm sustainable. So kind of how do we get over that? Because we need everybody to share the data. And maybe one way of doing that is that we're going to need to kind of develop systems of how we measure the data, and maybe we need some sort of independent trust body that can take this information on and kind of verify it in some form or fashion. And I think one of the things that we're all going to struggle with in the very near future is trust. The brands are going to become hugely important because you're not sure what you're looking at anymore. So those brands that are already established are the ones that you're going to start to trust, and that's quite a big thing. So how do we know as designers, how do we know we can trust the data that's going to come in? At the moment, we're probably years away from really seeing this data and being able to make sort of rational decisions about it. But how do we know that it's all, how real that is? And the struggle, like you said, there's so many variables. Like you were saying, Chris, you could be just next door to a wind farm and makes a massive difference. And they do the same stuff with cars. If you look at the cost of the car from a carbon point of view right now, electric, it's all great, but right now, half of it's coal-powered fire stations producing the electricity. But in 20 years' time, it's going to change. So the other issue we got is a changing environment.
And because up to now, we still see in some process some misalignment in how calculating the weight of a seat. Yeah. Weight is, so easy to calculate and so biased, but we can still see very funny way of measuring the seat weight. So that's true. I'm not so confident we will make it for the life cycle, where it's much more complex than just the weight of the seat. And maybe that's where also we need Airbus and Boeing to help us and push for like standardized methodology, maybe some ranking by themselves to help airline take decisions, so that it can be a little bit more unbiased than it can be today with just voluntary communication on the subject.
Yeah, as you know, we are, of course, Brenna, working on life cycle assessment, also specifically for the cabin. We are also, of course, working with all of our suppliers on a code of conduct, on different types of, elements and so on how to measure things, and on the traceability of the data. And I fully agree. We need to agree on a common way of measuring things. And if we want to offer this traceability that we are all aiming at. So for sure, otherwise you're not playing in the same field and as per the same rules, so that's not going to work. But yeah, we are definitely, as you know, working on this.
Right, well, that's very insightful. So thank you very much for that. I think we overrun a bit of time, but the topic was very worth it. So I'd like to give a round of applause to our panelists. They did a fabulous job today. So thank you very much.